Why did no one ever ask where she came from? The snow hammered against the windows of the Iron Lantern, a small bar in Wyoming, and still the town never asked. They liked their bartender quiet. They liked her steady hand on the bottle, the way she remembered their drinks before they spoke, the way she never pushed when silence said more than words. 8 years she had lived among them, and in all that time, no one demanded an answer. But tonight, the questions she had buried were already waking. Hale, though most here called her, moved behind the counter with a rhythm that seemed effortless. Dark hair tied back, sleeves rolled to the elbow, eyes that caught everything without lingering too long. She carried herself like someone born to belong nowhere, yet trusted everywhere. To the locals, she was the best kind of bartender, reliable, patient, discreet. To herself, she was something else entirely. The fire in the hearth popped and flared, throwing orange light across the room. It warmed faces worn by wind and work, men in heavy coats, women with hands cracked by cold. Ranchers argued near the dartboard. Teenagers who had just turned 21 laughed too loud, clinking bottles like proof they had earned the right to be here. The mayor held court from his booth, spinning his fishing stories like gospel. Sharp-eyed even at 70, nursed a gin at the bar, watching everything as if nothing escaped her judgment. It was a scene ordinary enough to feel safe. Poured, polished, nodded, and moved on. To most, she was part of the furniture, steady as the oak beams overhead. But every so often the illusion cracked. The faint scar that ran in a crescent over her shoulder when her collar slipped. The way her gaze flicked to the door whenever it opened. The way her hand never truly left the bar rag or the bottle, always ready, always in reach of something she could use. And the way her silence sometimes carried more weight than words. Daniel Mercer, the sheriff, walked in late, stamping snow from his boots, his hat pulled low. He ordered the same club soda he always did, and she slid it toward him before he asked. He nodded, eyes sweeping the room the way hers did, two watchers in a town that didn't know it needed watching. Their silence was a kind of language, both lived by it. Outside the wind howled, dragging icy breath across the wooden doors. Inside, gossip buzzed. Tonight's topic wasn't cattle or the mayor's latest story, it was the convoys. Trucks seen driving north of Iron Ridge. Helicopters landing in frozen clearings at midnight. Men with night vision slipping through the woods. Special forces, some claimed, just training. Others whispered it wasn't training at all. His hand tightened on a glass for just a second. To anyone else, she looked calm, unbothered. But inside, her pulse shifted into a rhythm she hadn't felt in years. She had told herself it was buried, that the desert skis filled with tracer fire, the voices in her earpiece calling her Commander Hale, the chaos of Caracas, the silence after, it all belonged to another life. But the past has a way of refusing burial. The door creaked open again and the storm slipped inside. 4 men stepped in. They looked like civilians, jeans, jackets, boots, but knew better before they crossed the threshold. Their eyes swept the room too fast. Their movements were too tight, too practiced. Wolves in a room full of sheep. The bar fell quieter, the chatter breaking against an invisible wall. Kept polishing the glass, her face unchanged, but her body had already shifted. Breathing measured, pulse low, every sense alive. The tallest man paused just inside the doorway, shoulders squared, his presence sharp as a blade. His gaze swept the bar and froze when it reached her. For a moment his expression cracked. His eyes narrowed, mouth parting slightly like a man staring at a ghost. Turned away, reaching for another bottle, face smooth, movement steady. But her hand tightened around the counter's edge. He knew her. And she knew him. Commander Cole, once her junior officer, a soldier who had fought beside her, bled beside her, a man who had stood at her side in Caracas before the world declared her dead. He stepped closer, his voice a whisper buried under the noise of the bar. Commander Hale. The name cut the air, turned slowly, meeting his eyes with a coolness that belonged to a stranger. "You've got the wrong person." Her tone was steady, but her silence carried warning. Cole didn't blink. "That scar on your right shoulder. Caracas 2015. Shrapnel tore you open. I was there. I saw you bleed." Set the glass down. A flicker of a smile, half threat, half plea, touched her lips. "You've mistaken me," she murmured and moved away. But Cole's voice followed, low and desperate. "They told us you were dead. We buried an empty casket at Annapolis, and now you're here, pouring whiskey in Wyoming." Her jaw tightened, though she gave no answer. The bar carried on, laughter, clinking glasses, pool balls knocking against green felt. But between them, silence stretched taut as wire. Cole pressed again. "The rest of the team is gone. Monroe, all of them, dead one by one. I thought I was the only one left." His hand paused mid-motion, her pulse spiking against her ribs. She forced her breathing calm, forced her face blank. She leaned in, just close enough for him to hear. "You need to stop talking." And then she moved down the counter, distance reclaimed. The door opened again, dragging a blast of cold air inside. Sheriff Mercer stepped forward, eyes sharper than usual. His voice was quiet when he reached her. "Couple of suits came through earlier," he said. "Said they were defense. Their IDs didn't sit right." Kept her back to him, polishing a glass. "What did you tell them?" "The truth. That you bought this place 8 years ago, and no one's seen you leave since." Her jaw flexed. She gave a nod. Mercer didn't ask more. Some truths carried their own warning. But the storm outside had already shifted. Headlights flared against the frosted windows. Engines idled. Tires crunched on ice. Black SUVs slid into position outside, their doors slamming in unison. The bar hushed. Mercer's hand brushed his sidearm. Set down the rag. Every sense in her body locked into readiness. The door opened, and the storm entered. Silver hair, a tailored suit hidden under a tactical vest. Authority in his posture, cold precision in his smile. Director Randall Graves. He looked at as though he had found exactly what he came for. "Well," he said, voice smooth as polished steel. "Hale, or should I say Commander Hale, I was told you died in Caracas." The words dropped into the bar like stone into water. The ripples were instant. Cole stiffened, his men shifting, Mercer tensing by the counter. Didn't move. For 8 years she had lived as someone else. For 8 years she had built her life on silence, on a disguise so ordinary no one dared look deeper. Now her name was spoken aloud, and the disguise was ash. The iron lantern had never been so quiet. His voice was calm, sharp enough to cut glass. "Everyone out." The locals hesitated, but one look from her and they moved, boots thudding, chairs scraping, coats pulled hurriedly on. The mayor muttered a question, but she silenced him with a glance. Grabbed her coat, eyes darting between the woman she thought she knew and the man in the suit who clearly knew more. In minutes, the room was empty. The bar was no longer a refuge. It was a... Snow blew through the half-open door. The fire snapped in the hearth. And Hale, once just a bartender in a small Wyoming town, stood in the open, past and present colliding, her secret no longer hers to keep. Her life here was over. And the storm she had outrun for 8 long years had finally found her. Why hadn't she run when she had the chance? The firelight cracked against the silence, snow slipping in through the half-open doorway. Outside, black SUVs idled, their exhaust curling into the winter night like waiting ghosts. Inside, the iron lantern had emptied, its laughter and warmth replaced by a tension so sharp it cut into the bone. Hale stood in the center of it. Her hands rested flat against the bar, every muscle ready, her eyes fixed on Randall Graves. He looked older than when she had last seen him, silver hair neat, lines carved deep into his face, but his presence was unchanged. Command lived in the tilt of his chin, in the way the armed men behind him obeyed without question. "You should have stayed buried," Graves said softly. "The dead don't betray anyone." Cole shifted at her side, his men spreading with instinctive precision, sliding behind tables, their movements quiet but clear. Cover, angles, fields of fire. Wolves bristling against wolves. Mercer, steady at the counter, hovered near his sidearm but held back. He wasn't trained for this fight and he knew it, yet he stayed. That too said something. His voice came low, steady. "You think I've spent 8 years pouring whiskey for ranchers because I wanted peace?" Graves gave a thin smile. "Because you had nowhere else to go. Because you were smart enough to know Project Helix was bigger than you." The name sliced through the room. Cole's jaw tightened. His men exchanged sharp glances. Mercer's eyes flicked toward her, a question unspoken. Let silence answer for a long beat. Finally, she stepped away from the bar, her disguise falling from her like ash. The bartender's posture, the quiet, invisible rhythm vanished. In its place was something sharper, something old and unforgotten. Shoulders squared, steps measured, presence commanding. Cole saw it immediately. The woman who had once led him through fire had returned. Graves' smile faltered just enough to betray that he felt it too. He gave a small nod. "Take her." The order landed like a hammer. In an instant, rifles lifted. Black-suited agents fanned through the room, their boots thudding against oak. Red laser dots flickered across the tables. Cole's voice snapped like a whip. "Cover." The SEALs moved as one, flipping chairs, sliding behind thick wood beams, weapons drawn in smooth arcs. The air buzzed, a second from eruption. Mercer drew his pistol at last, hands steady, eyes fixed, but raised a palm, halting him. Then she moved. Fast, precise, the kind of speed born from endless hours of training and years of survival. She lunged into the nearest agent, wrenching his rifle sideways as her knee crushed into his thigh. He dropped, pain choking his shout, and before another heartbeat passed, she had his sidearm in her grip. The shift was complete. Hale, bartender, was gone. Commander Hale had returned. Her pistol leveled on Graves. "You killed my team in Caracas," she said. Her voice wasn't raised, but the steel inside it rang louder than the crackling fire. Cole's men froze, stunned by the precision of her movement. Even Cole himself, who had seen her lead under fire, felt a pulse of awe. Graves didn't flinch. They discovered what they shouldn't have. They were silenced, necessary sacrifices. His jaw tightened. 12 American scientists, executed because they knew too much. Don't dress it in patriotism. Helix was never about national security. It was about money. The room shifted. Cole's men bristled. Mercer's hand whitened around his pistol. Even Graves' own agents looked uneasy, the certainty in their eyes cracked by the weight of her words. Graves gave a small shrug. "Sometimes power demands blood. That's the price of staying ahead." Her grip tightened on the pistol. For a second, the air itself seemed to scream for release. But didn't fire. Instead, she reached slowly into her jacket with her free hand. Rifles jerked toward her in reflex. Cole's men aimed in response, seconds from chaos. When his hand emerged, it wasn't with another weapon. She held a small, battered external hard drive. Its metal casing glinted in the firelight. "I built a fail-safe," she said evenly. "Every 10 days, if I don't reset a timer, this drive triggers an automatic release. 31 news outlets across the world get everything. Research files, transactions, names, proof." The words dropped like stones. The fire popped once in the silence. Graves' mask cracked. His jaw tightened, his hands curling behind his back. "You're bluffing." His eyes didn't waver. "Try me. I had 8 days between discovery and the ambush. I used every hour." The air was taut as wire. Rifles held steady, fingers tight against triggers. Cole's men locked eyes with the black-suited agents, no one daring to move. Mercer stayed frozen, pistol low, gaze sharp. For a long, suspended moment, it seemed the room would collapse into gunfire. And then, the door burst open. A blast of snow and wind roared inside, followed by half a dozen figures in dark jackets, weapons drawn, letters bold across their backs. FBI. Director Randall Graves, the lead agent called out, voice sharp and cutting. You're under investigation for treason. Put your weapon down. The room fractured. Graves' agents froze, caught between orders. Cole's men stayed locked in place, muzzles fixed, refusing to blink. Mercer's eyes darted, calculating. Didn't move, her pistol still leveled steady. The woman at the front strode forward, credentials flashing in her hand. Assistant Director, Counterintelligence Division. Commander Hale's testimony confirmed what we needed. This ends here. Graves' face drained pale, his arrogance breaking under the weight of her words. This is above your clearance, he spat. Didn't slow. It's exactly my clearance. Order your men to lower their weapons or they'll face the same charges you do. The agents behind her spread out, weapons aimed in flawless arcs. The bar became a frozen tableau. Every man, every rifle, every breath hung suspended in the firelight. Graves' eyes cut to one last time. Hatred lived sharp and cold inside his glare. This isn't over, he hissed. You have no idea how deep Helix runs. Didn't blink. She holstered the pistol with calm precision. Then let's find out. Her words hung in the silence, carried on the hiss of the storm. For the first time in 8 years, she wasn't hiding anymore. She was standing exactly where she was meant to be, visible, unbroken, and ready. Why did the hearing room feel colder than the battlefield? Fluorescent lights glared down, flat and merciless. The walls carried the sterile hush of government chambers, flags motionless behind a long row of officials. The air smelled faintly of paper, steel, and disinfectant, a place where truth was dissected, not spoken. Hale sat at the center table, spine straight, eyes level. In her posture there was no bartender, no small-town quiet. Only the soldier she had once been, summoned back under the lights America could cast. To her left, Assistant Director stood with calm authority, binder under one arm. To her right, an analyst prepared a series of files. The chair at the long table spoke with clipped precision. Proceed. A monitor flickered to life. Account numbers scrolled across the screen. Arrows leapt across a digital map. Zurich, Malta, the Seychelles. Dirty money laundering clean across oceans. His voice was steady, stripped of flourish. Funds moved through front corporations. Military procurement was the cover. Invoices disguised as weapon systems. The actual transfers led here. Her finger tapped the line that ended in a blind account. The analyst confirmed with timestamps and routing codes. Then came the faces. 12 scientists. American, brilliant, murdered. Their photos blurred for record, their names read aloud. His voice did not waver when she spoke them, though each syllable carried the weight of the dead. The dates formed a pattern, a sequence of silenced voices, erased under the banner of national security but tied, now undeniably, to commerce and greed. The room shifted. Whispers rippled through the back row until the chair raised a hand, restoring silence. Followed with bureau findings. Subpoenaed emails unrolled like wire, encrypted chats decoded and pinned to travel logs, meetings that never should have happened, aircraft that never should have flown. The figure landed at last. Total value siphoned, $2.4 billion. It hung heavy in the room, not just a number, a scale of betrayal. Let the silence hold. Then she said quietly, Project Helix was not defense, it was arithmetic, blood for balance sheets. The words cut, no one interrupted. Questions came, sharp and relentless. Why had she stayed off the grid? How had she secured evidence? What guaranteed the release if she vanished? Answered in plain language without hesitation. The fail-safe is tied to a remote clock. If I miss the reset, a server authenticates my key and distributes files to 31 global outlets. It cannot be stopped. Not by me, not by anyone. The words landed like iron. A system built not on trust but on inevitability. Hours stretched. The hearing rolled on. Names tied to contracts, generals to shell companies, admirals to signatures that dripped blood in invisible ink. The chain reached higher than many wanted to admit. At last the chair closed a folder with a quiet snap. "Commander Hale, your testimony is complete." No applause followed. No handshakes. Nothing in this room honored applause. Rose, her spine still straight, her silence still intact. The corridor outside was colder still. Marshals moved past in file, escorting men who had once signed orders, men who had spoken in polished halls, their uniforms bright, their titles carved in steel. Now their wrists were bound in zip ties, their eyes lowered to the tile floor. A vice admiral refused to meet the cameras. An assistant secretary stared blankly ahead. Randall Graves walked last, his silver hair shining under sterile lights, his smile gone, his eyes hollow. Cole waited near the elevators, coat folded over one arm. Relief and grief sat in his gaze in equal measure. He didn't salute. He didn't need to. Respect didn't require ceremony here. "We thought you were gone," he said softly. "Turns out you lived long enough to save the whole country." Let the words pass without answer. She had no use for them, no space left for pride. She nodded once. "Join them," phone pressed to her ear. Her words were clipped when she ended the call. "Justice moves, not fast, but forward." It was the closest thing to comfort she ever gave. Reporters waited outside, barricades keeping them at bay. Microphones rose like a field of black flowers, voices shouting questions that blurred into each other. Stopped at the rope line. The cameras captured her face, the soldier who returned from the dark. "I can't speak to sealed matters," she said, voice calm, firm. "The record stands on its own." Questions flew anyway, about reinstatement, about vengeance, about duty. She let them fall. A black sedan carried her away under a sky the color of stone. Washington's glass towers slid past the window, cold and impersonal. She didn't look back. The city was not her home. It never had been. 2 days later the plains opened again, wide and endless. Returned small, certain, steady against the cold. The iron lantern stood where it always had, its wood but upright, its lantern glowing faint in the dusk. She unlocked the door and stepped inside. Silence greeted her. Not the silence of suspicion or tension, but the familiar quiet of wood and fire and the space she had built to forget. The town returned by degrees. Mayor Brooks took his booth again, mumbling about weather as if nothing had shifted. Claimed her stool, sharper eyes than ever, but her silence respectful now. Ranchers, drunks, kids, they came back, but each glance toward carried something new. Respect, unease, a mix of both. The ordinary was trying to return, but ordinary never felt the same after the mask was pulled away. Later that night, Mercer came in, uniform hidden under a plain jacket. He didn't sit right away, just lingered near the corner, weighing the step like a man about to test thin ice. Then he took the stool. "For years," he said quietly, "I figured you were just the best keeper of secrets this town ever had. Turns out that was true, and not nearly the whole of it." Poured him a club soda without asking. "Both can be true," she answered, "and both still are." It felt like a door closing, not slammed, latched clean. They spoke little after that. Words were heavy things, and they had already carried enough weight. Why was it harder to face her neighbors than to face a firing squad? Stood behind the bar of the iron lantern, the familiar wood under her hands. The fire in the hearth flickered like it always had. Glasses clinked. Boots scraped across the floor. On the surface, nothing had changed. And yet everything had. The people have came back. one by one as though testing the air. The mayor returned to his corner booth, though his stories of fishing sounded smaller now, his eyes flicking toward as if measuring her against something he couldn't name. Claimed her stool again, her gaze sharp as ever, but her silence now carried a different weight, as though she knew more than she'd ever wanted to. The ranchers drank, the kids laughed. The drunk philosopher still slurred his half-poems into empty bottles. The rhythm tried to rebuild itself, but every beat carried a pause. No one called her anymore. They said, or sometimes nothing at all. She poured, polished, nodded, and moved on just as before. But inside, she felt the shift. The disguise was gone. The woman they thought they knew had been replaced by something they couldn't quite fit into their lives. Sheriff Mercer noticed it first. He leaned on the bar one night after closing, voice low, careful. "They don't know how to look at you," he said. "You're still the same to them, but also not." Dried a glass, her hand steady though the truth cut deep. "I was never just what they thought I was," she said softly, "but I wanted to be." Mercer didn't argue. Some truths didn't need debate. For the hardest part wasn't the whispers or the wary glances. It was the quiet moments. The ones she had once filled with nothing more than routine, counting bottles, wiping tables, listening to the crack of fire. Now those silences were crowded, with memories, with questions, with the faces of her team gone because she had lived. Monroe. Names she carried like stones. Every time the wind howled against the windows, she heard the desert again. Every time the door opened, her pulse kicked, waiting for ghosts to walk in. She had thought testifying would end something. Instead, it had reopened everything. The fail-safe hard drive sat locked in a safe under the floorboards. Its presence was a weight she felt even when she didn't look at it. A promise. A threat. Insurance against a world that had already proven how far it would go. One night long after the bar had emptied, Cole walked in. His presence was quieter now. Not as the officer who once called her commander, but as a man who had lost his brothers and found her alive against all odds. He didn't sit at first. He stood by the fire, staring into the flames like they might give back the years he'd lost. Finally he turned. "They're saying Helix is finished," he said. Met his eyes, her silence sharp enough to answer. Cole gave a short, humorless laugh. "Yeah, I don't believe it either." She poured him a drink he didn't ask for. He held it without drinking. "They'll bury what they can," he said. "Sacrifice the ones they have to, but the money, the networks, they don't just vanish. Not for something that size." Leaned against the counter, her voice low. "Helix doesn't sleep, it waits." For a long time neither spoke. The fire cracked. The wind pushed against the windows. Outside slept oblivious. Cole finished his drink, set the glass down, and left without another word. The next morning a package arrived at the bar. No return address. Brown paper tied with twine. Opened it carefully. Inside was a stack of photographs, satellite images, a facility carved into a mountainside, trucks moving in convoys, men in tactical gear slipping between shadows. And at the bottom, a single sheet of paper with one sentence typed in black. "Helix lives." Her breath slowed, her pulse didn't. She burned the paper in the hearth, but the image seared itself into her anyway. That night Mercer returned, uniform under a heavy coat, snow clinging to his boots. He sat at the bar, his eyes already searching hers. "You've heard something," he said. Didn't answer at first. She poured his club soda, slid it toward him. Then she said quietly, "It isn't finished. None of it." Mercer's jaw clenched. He wasn't a soldier. He wasn't trained for this world. But he had the kind of courage that didn't need training. "Then you'll need someone watching your back," he said. Almost smiled, almost. But her eyes stayed hard. "This isn't a fight you walk into, Daniel." Mercer leaned closer, his voice steady. "The fight's already here." She said nothing, but deep inside she knew he was right. The town that had sheltered her secret was no longer untouched. The storm had found its way in, and storms never stop at the first crack in the door. Locked the bar that night and stepped outside into the snow. The stars burned above, sharp and cold, too bright for comfort. She thought of her team. She thought of Graves in chains, smiling like the devil even as marshals took him away. And she thought of the words on the paper. Helix lives. The snow crunched under her boots as she walked home, the cold biting deep. For 8 years she had hidden, for weeks she had, for a moment she had believed it might be over. But it was. And she knew, with a certainty that cut like a blade, that this story had only just begun. Why did the snow feel heavier this winter? Stood outside the iron lantern, key in hand, her breath hanging in the cold air. The town looked the same, glowing against falling flakes, storefronts quiet, windows lined with faint yellow light. But beneath the calm, something pulsed, a wrongness that didn't belong to small towns or quiet nights. Inside, she unlocked the bar, set bottles in their place, wiped down counters that didn't need wiping. Routine used to soothe her. Now it only reminded her how fragile routine was. The package still haunted her, the photographs, the words. Helix lives. She told herself it could be a bluff, a scare tactic, but she knew better. Secrets that dangerous never die. They shift, they wait. The first sign came 2 nights later. The mayor, half drunk, muttered that strangers had been asking about her again. 2 men in suits, clean-shaven, too sharp for a logging town. They hadn't come into the lantern, but they'd asked questions at the gas station, the diner, the grocery store. Defense contractors, they claimed, looking for old colleagues. Felt the shift in her stomach before he finished speaking. She nodded, poured him another whiskey, and said nothing. But inside she was already calculating. Later that night Mercer came in. Snow clung to his jacket, his expression darker than usual. He sat at the bar without a word. "Didn't need to ask. You saw them too," she said. Mercer nodded. Not FBI, not bureau, not even agency. Their papers looked good, but not real good. Like they'd been dressed up fast. "I don't like it." Leaned back against the shelves, her arms folded. "Helix is still moving. They want me back under, dead if possible." Mercer's jaw tightened. "Then I'm not letting you walk alone." Gave him a long look. He wasn't military. He wasn't trained for this fight. But there was a steadiness in his eyes that reminded her of something rare, loyalty that wasn't bound by rank or orders. She didn't thank him, but she didn't argue either. The next day, Cole returned. He wasn't supposed to, his unit had redeployed, but he walked through the lantern's door anyway, his presence filling the room before he even spoke. "They're not finished," he said without preamble. "Helix has lines we didn't touch. I've got chatter about a site in Montana, remote, fortified, no official record. They're still moving equipment, still hearing contractors." Stayed silent, polishing a glass that was already clean. "You can't stay out of it," Cole pressed. "Not anymore. They already know where you are. Hiding won't work." Her hand stopped moving. She set the glass down slowly. "I didn't stay out of it," she said. "I buried myself alive to keep the rest of you safe, and look how that turned out." Cole's face softened. He knew she carried the names of the dead like a rosary. Monroe, every one of them carved into her silence. "You don't get to blame yourself for their choices," he said. Met his gaze, eyes sharp. Command doesn't get that luxury. The fire crackled, the silence stretched. Finally, Cole leaned closer. "If you want to stop Helix, you won't do it behind this bar. You'll do it with me." She didn't answer, not with words, but the truth was already clawing at her chest. Staying hidden wasn't safety anymore. It was a delay. The choice pressed harder a week later. The lantern closed late. Snow was falling thick outside, muffling the streets. Turned the key in the lock, adjusted her coat, and started home. She didn't hear the SUV until it was too late. Headlights flared. Tires crunched over ice. A black vehicle rolled slow down the street, its windows dark. Froze, pulse steadying into the rhythm of danger. The SUV slowed near her, pausing just long enough to let her feel its presence. Then it moved on, disappearing into the night. But she knew. It wasn't random, it wasn't local. It was a message. The next morning, she found the message written in clearer ink. The back door of the bar hung slightly ajar. No sign of forced entry, no lock broken. Inside, nothing stolen, nothing obvious disturbed. Except the safe. She opened it with careful hands. The hard drive was still there, but beside it, tucked neatly into the empty corner, lay a single black playing card, the ace of spades. Stared at it, her throat tight. Helix had been here. They hadn't taken the drive, not yet. They had left the card instead, a warning, a promise. When Mercer came that evening, she showed him the card. His face hardened, his hand instinctively brushing the badge on his chest. "They're already inside," he said. Nodded, which means it's only a matter of time before they stop warning. He studied her face for a long moment. So what now? She closed the safe, locking it with deliberate care. Her voice came quiet, almost a whisper. "I stopped running once. Maybe it's time I stop again." That night she walked home slower than usual. The stars cut cold against the sky, the air sharp in her lungs. Every step felt heavier, not because she was afraid, she'd lived with fear too long to name it, but because she knew what it meant. The line she had drawn, the fragile wall between the woman pouring drinks and the commander buried in silence, it was gone. Helix was alive. And now so was she. Why did the road out of town feel like betrayal? Drove west before dawn, headlights cutting through the Wyoming dark. The iron lantern sat locked behind her, its fire cold, its bar silent. She hadn't told the townsfolk she was leaving. They didn't deserve that weight. She carried enough of it for them all. In the passenger seat, Cole rode with quiet intensity. His gear was stripped down, no uniform, no insignia. Just a soldier stripped bare of titles, carrying only the past and the will to finish what had been left undone. In the back, Sheriff Mercer leaned against the window, his service pistol holstered at his side. He didn't belong here and he knew it. But when told him to stay behind, he only said, "The fight's already here. I might as well be too." Hadn't argued. Maybe because a part of her needed someone untouched by war, someone who reminded her of the world she claimed to be fighting for. The road stretched endless, snow swallowing the landscape. The silence inside the car was thick. Cole finally broke it. Montana, coordinates line up with the photos, remote facility carved into rock. Helix is still moving assets there, contractors, scientists, security thick enough to call it private military. His eyes stayed fixed on the road, and the bureau. Cole shook his head. Can't get clearance, too many names still in play, too many shadows. She sent what she could, but this one's off the books. His grip tightened on the wheel. She had known this would be the answer. Helix lived in places too dark for official channels. Mercer shifted forward. "So we're just driving toward them, 3 people against an army." Cole smirked faintly. 3 people who know what they're doing, 2 at least. Mercer didn't laugh, neither did. She pulled off the main road hours later, the sky pale with weak daylight. Pines closed in around them, branches heavy with snow. The air turned sharper, thinner, like it carried secrets. They parked a mile short of the coordinates. No lights, no trail, just cold wilderness and the sound of their breaths. Crouched low, scanning the tree line, every movement precise, every sense alive again in ways she hadn't let herself feel for 8 years. Cole watched her with something like recognition. "You're back," he murmured. She didn't answer, she didn't need to. They moved through the snow in silence, boots sinking, branches snapping soft beneath them. Mercer struggled to match their pace, but his determination carried him forward. At the ridge they saw it. Carved into the side of a mountain hidden from the world, the facility rose like a scar. Concrete walls, guard towers, trucks rolling through gates under heavy escort. Crouched studying, her voice came low, deliberate. This isn't just a base, it's a hub. Movement, storage, communications. They're rebuilding here. Cole's jaw tightened. And we can't take it head on, not like this. Mercer exhaled, his breath white in the cold. Then why are we here? His gaze stayed on the facility. To see, to prove, to know exactly what's still alive. For hours they watched. Guards shifting, trucks unloading, men in dark uniforms moving crates marked with numbers that meant nothing to the untrained eye but screamed danger to hers. Then came the sight that hollowed her chest. A group of scientists, escorted under armed watch, their faces pale, their steps hesitant, not volunteers, prisoners. Felt her pulse shift. They're building something, she whispered, and they're doing it with stolen minds. Cole's hand brushed his rifle. Then we end it. His eyes stayed fixed. Not tonight, we die before we cross the gate, and their work would go on. Mercer swallowed hard. So what we just watch? Turned to him, her voice was quiet but sharp. Survival isn't weakness, it's strategy. Dead men don't stop Helix. They pulled back before dark, moving silent through the trees, but's mind stayed at the ridge. Back at a small cabin Cole had secured through a contact, they sat around a dim lantern. Maps spread across the table, notes scrawled in cold handwriting. Mercer leaned back, shaking his head. This isn't just about you anymore. They've got people in cages, scientists, civilians. You can't run from that. His eyes burned into the paper. I never planned to run, but going in blind is suicide. Cole leaned forward. Then we build a plan, you, me, Mercer. We hit the cracks, we free who we can, and we burn what's left. Silence was long. She stared at the maps, her mind flicking between the cold present and the ghosts of the past. Her team, the ones who had trusted her, followed her, died for her. Was she about to lead again, only to watch more faces disappear into the dark? Her chest ached with the weight of it. Finally she looked up, her eyes steady, her voice low. If we do this, there's no turning back, not for any of us. Cole nodded once. That's the point. Mercer met her gaze, unflinching. I already decided. The lantern flickered. The maps waited. And Hale, who had once buried herself alive to escape this world, sat in silence, knowing she had stepped back into command. That night she couldn't sleep. She stood outside the cabin, snow falling light against her coat. The mountains loomed, black shapes against a darker sky. Her breath hung in the air, vanishing into the cold. How many times could one life be rebuilt, only to be shattered again? How many times could she risk others before the weight of it broke her? Her scars itched in the cold, memories clawed, Caracas, the ambush, Graves' smile, the silence of a casket filled with nothing. But beneath it all, a fire burned. Not anger, not revenge. Resolve. Helix had stolen too much, too many lives, too much truth. And if she had to burn the disguise she had built, if she had to step back into the fight, then so be it. For the first time in years, she didn't feel like she was hiding. She felt alive. How many times can a person walk into fire and still come back out? The mountain loomed ahead, black and sharp against the winter sky. Snow fell light, muffling the world. From a distance, the Helix facility looked like a scar carved into stone, towers, floodlights, walls that didn't belong in wilderness. Hale crouched low in the tree line, her breath steady, her eyes locked on the gate. Cole knelt beside her, silent, watching the guard patterns. Mercer stayed a step behind, his pulse too loud in his ears, but he didn't waver. They had spent days watching, learning. Truck rotations every 6 hours, guard shifts staggered, cameras blind in narrow windows. It wasn't much, but it was enough. Whispered, her voice clipped. We move when the convoy rolls. Cole, you take rear cover. Mercer, you stick with me. No deviations. Mercer gave a short nod. He wasn't military, but he listened like someone who understood that hesitation killed. The rumble of engines came on time. 2 trucks rolled up the mountain road, snow crunching beneath their weight. Guards at the gate shifted, focused on paperwork, clearing space for the convoy. Moved. They slipped through shadows, steps precise, movements low and fast. Heart didn't race, it slowed. Focused. The rhythm she had buried for years returned like it had been waiting in her blood all along. At the fence, Cole clipped the wire, hands practiced, movements sure. They slid through, breath fogging in the cold. Inside the perimeter, the world felt sharper. Floodlights swept, boots crunched, radios crackled. Guided Mercer into cover, Cole ghosting behind them, their triangle of silence cutting through the noise of Helix's machine. They reached the storage wing first. Stacks of crates towered inside, marked with stenciled numbers and symbols. Brushed her gloved hand across one. Her stomach twisted. Not weapons, components. Technology stripped from the hands of the scientists she had for. The dead still worked for Helix, their research stolen, repurposed. Her jaw tightened. They moved deeper. The hallway ahead hummed with fluorescent light. 2 guards walked the corridor, raised her hand, signaled. Cole slipped forward, silent as shadow, striking clean, 1 guard down, then the other, bodies lowered without a sound. Mercer's eyes widened, but he followed. Kept moving. They reached a locked door. Through its narrow glass pane she saw them. The scientists. 6 maybe more. Faces pale, eyes hollow, movements slow with exhaustion. Prisoners. Mercer exhaled, almost breaking the silence. God. His chest tightened. She reached for the keypad, her fingers moving with memory. Numbers punched, sequence cracked, lock released with a soft click. The door swung open. The scientists stared, disbelief etched into their faces. His voice came low, firm. We're here to get you out. Stay quiet, stay close. Hope flickered, fragile but alive. Cole and Mercer guided them into the hall, forming a shield with their bodies. Took point, pistol steady, every sense screaming for movement ahead. But Helix wasn't blind. The alarm shattered the silence. A piercing wail, red lights flashing, boots pounding across steel. His blood chilled. They know, she snapped. Move. The hallway erupted with chaos. Guards poured in, rifles raised. Fired, shots sharp and precise. Cole moved like a blade, cutting angles, dropping targets clean. Mercer fired too, not as fluid but steady, his courage louder than his fear. The scientists clung to the walls, covering their ears, their faces twisted with terror. Shouted over the chaos, down the service hall, go. The group stumbled forward, shepherded by Mercer. Cole stayed tight to the rear, covering. Advanced, every shot deliberate, every step earned. But the tide kept coming. More guards, more rifles, more shadows spilling from the corners of the facility. His mind flashed with memory. Caracas, her team boxed in, her people cut down one by one. Not again. Not this time. They reached the service corridor. Ahead, a faint glow, an emergency exit leading to the tree line. Freedom. But the choke point was narrow. Too narrow for all of them to pass before the guards closed in. His pulse slowed. The choice came clear. She turned to Cole. Get them out. His eyes snapped to hers. No, not without you. Her voice sharpened. That's an order. The words cut, the old weight of command. Cole froze for half a beat, then nodded once, his face hard with grief. He herded the scientists, Mercer pushing from behind. The group surged toward the light. Turned. Alone now, she stood in the corridor, pistol raised, eyes cold. The guards flooded in, rifles flashing red under the alarm. She fired, precise, relentless, a wall of defiance against the tide. For every step they took, she took one back. For every shot they fired, she answered. Her body moved with a rhythm older than fear. The scientists stumbled into the snow, Cole and Mercer shielding them, shoving them down the slope. Shots cracked behind them. Cole looked back once. Still stood in the hall, fire in her stance, unbroken even as the world closed around her. Then smoke swallowed her. The last thing Cole saw was her silhouette, pistol raised, the commander who refused to fall quietly. How long can a single moment last? The corridor shook with gunfire, alarms screaming, smoke curling thick against the ceiling. Stood in the red glow, pistol raised, her breaths calm, her body steady. Every bullet she fired bought seconds. Seconds for Mercer to lead the scientists through the snow. Seconds for Cole to drag them farther from the mountain. Seconds that carried life. Her ears rang, her shoulder burned. The past roared through her, the desert sky, tracer fire, the empty casket at Annapolis. The names of her team whispered in her chest like prayers. Monroe. Not this time. Pivoted, dropped another guard, advanced a step. For every life behind her, she took the weight forward. And then silence. Her pistol clicked empty. The magazine fell, clattering against steel. The guards hesitated. Guns trained, boots heavy, yet none stepped forward. For a breath, even they seemed to feel it, that this wasn't just a woman cornered. This was a soldier standing. His voice cut through the smoke, low, steady, final. You'll never bury it all, not this time. The world already knows. Her words hung in the air, not shouted, not desperate, certain. The guards closed in. The mountain swallowed the sound. Cole half carried, half dragged a scientist down the slope, his breath ragged in the freezing air. Behind him, Mercer shouted for the others to keep moving, his voice shaking but steady enough to guide. The night split with gunfire from the facility, then smoke, then silence. Cole's chest ached, his legs burned, but the only thought hammering in his skull was don't look back. They reached the tree line, stumbled into cover. The scientists collapsed, gasping, clutching each other. Mercer dropped beside them, his face pale with exhaustion. Cole finally turned. The facility glowed faint red against the dark, alarms still wailing. He searched for her silhouette in the windows, the flash of her pistol, anything. But there was nothing. His throat closed. For a moment the soldier in him cracked, grief tearing open old wounds. He had thought she was dead once before. He had mourned her at Annapolis, buried an empty casket. And now it was happening again. Except this time it wasn't silence. This time it was sacrifice. Mercer put a hand on his shoulder, voice low, rough. She bought them out, she knew the cost. Cole swallowed hard. His eyes burned, but he forced the words through. Then we don't waste it. Dawn broke cold over the ridge. The rescued scientists were airlifted out by his team, whisked into blankets, faces etched with disbelief that they were still alive. Cole and Mercer stood apart, snow clinging to their boots, watching as the helicopters rose. Neither spoke. Approached, her face drawn tight. We'll scrub the site, burn everything Helix left behind, but you know as well as I do, this isn't the end. Cole's jaw tightened. No, it's not. Her eyes softened just enough to betray the weight she carried too. She gave us what we needed, testimony, proof, and now this. She gestured to the scientists boarding the helicopter. That's how you kill something like Helix, piece by piece, truth by truth. Mercer turned to her, his voice raw. What about? Silence said more than words. Finally, she shook her head. Sometimes the bravest don't come home. Cole closed his eyes. The words cut deep. But inside, another thought burned. Sometimes they don't need to. Weeks passed, carried on the way small towns do. The bar reopened. The fire glowed. The mayor told his stories, sat with her gin. The rhythm returned, though quieter, more reverent. People still said her name. Not anymore, not even. Commander Hale. Not loudly, not often, but with the kind of weight that didn't need volume. Mercer kept the lantern running in her absence, though he swore it was only temporary. He poured club sodas for himself, whiskey for others, and said little. Cole visited less often. His unit called him back, but when he came through town, he always stopped by. He would sit at the bar in silence, a glass untouched before him, his eyes distant. Sometimes when the wind howled against the windows, he swore he could hear her voice again. Calm, certain, commanding. The world moved forward. Trials began. Graves sat in chains, his arrogance stripped, though his eyes still carried the shadow of secrets. Helix's networks cracked open in pieces, contracts exposed, names dragged into light. But even as justice rolled on, whispers lingered. That the mountain facility wasn't the only one. That other cells still lived, deeper, darker, waiting. Cole knew it was true. And somehow he believed knew it too. Wherever she was. One night months later, Mercer closed the lantern early. The snow outside was heavy, blanketing the town in silence. He flipped the sign, turned the bolt, and stepped out into the street. The stars cut sharp against the sky. He walked slowly, hands deep in his coat pockets. At the corner he paused, looking up, breath curling into the cold. He thought of her. Of the bartender who never asked questions. Of the soldier who had carried secrets heavier than steel. Of the commander who stood when no one else could. And he thought of the truth she had left behind. That sometimes dignity doesn't shout. It doesn't beg to be seen. It simply stands. And in standing it saves. Hale's story didn't end in silence. It lived in the lives she saved, in the truths she unburied, in the fire that still burned quietly in the dark corners of the world. Maybe she was gone. Maybe she was. But the legacy she left behind was clear. Some battles don't end with victory. Some end with survival. Some end with a single act that refuses to break. And sometimes that's enough.